Recently, speculation has circulated about the possibility of China sending as many as 3 million Uyghurs to Turkey. The claim appeared in some media reports and social discussions, but no official confirmation exists from either Beijing or Ankara. However, the discussion surrounding the claim reflects deeper concerns about the fate of Uyghurs in China, Turkey's position as host to a significant Uyghur diaspora, and the country's already heavy refugee burden. The Uyghurs are a Turkic Muslim minority concentrated in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. For centuries, they have had a distinct cultural and religious identity, which has often placed them at odds with the Chinese state. Since the early 2010s, the Chinese government has intensified its policies of control in Xinjiang, citing the need to fight extremism and separatism. Over the past decade, multiple reports from human rights organizations, academic researchers, and governments have documented systemic repression of Uyghurs. These measures include mass internment in so-called re-education or vocational training centers, widespread surveillance, restriction of religious practices, forced labor, and coercive population control policies. According to estimates, more than 1 million Uyghurs have been detained in camps. Independent investigations have shown that many Uyghurs have been transferred into labor programs both inside and outside Xinjiang. In 2023, Chinese state figures revealed that nearly 3 million workers had been relocated from Xinjiang to other provinces. Such large-scale transfers raise concerns about coercion and forced assimilation. Several bodies have assessed China's actions in Xinjiang as serious violations of international law. The Uyghur Tribunal concluded in 2021 that discrimination had been committed against Uyghurs, particularly through policies of forced sterilization and birth suppression. The tribunal also determined that crimes against humanity such as mass detention and torture were ongoing. In 2022, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights released a report warning that China's policies in Xinjiang could amount to crimes against humanity. Western governments, including the United States and members of the European Union, have imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and entities linked to forced labor and repression in Xinjiang. Chinese officials consistently reject these claims, stating through official channels that they do not correspond to reality. Turkey has long been a destination for Uyghurs seeking refuge due to cultural, linguistic, and religious ties. Estimates suggest that between 10,000 and 50,000 Uyghurs currently live in Turkey, with most communities concentrated in Istanbul, Ankara, and other major cities. These communities have established cultural associations, schools, and small businesses, helping to preserve Uyghur identity in exile. In the past, Turkish government strongly criticized China's treatment of Uyghurs. In 2009, then Prime Minister called the events in Xinjiang a high form of massacre. Turkish officials have also made public statements condemning Chinese policies, particularly during times of international scrutiny. Over time, Turkey has shifted its rhetoric and approach to the Uyghur issue. As Ankara deepened its economic and diplomatic ties with Beijing, especially through China's Belt and Road Initiative, official criticism became more muted. Yes, Turkey continues to host Uyghurs, but has faced accusations of placing restrictions on their political activities. Uyghur activists in Turkey have reported increased surveillance, harassment, and difficulties in obtaining legal residency. Some reports also suggest that Uyghurs in Turkey face the threat of deportation, particularly those without permanent legal status. While the Turkish government insists it has not extradited Uyghurs who hold Turkish citizenship, activists remain concerned about Ankara's balancing act between protecting Uyghur rights and maintaining relations with China. Turkey is already the world's largest refugee hosting country. It shelters over 5 million Syrians under temporary protection alongside hundreds of thousands of Afghans, Iraqis, and others. This influx has strained public services, housing markets, education systems, and healthcare infrastructure. The economic burden of supporting millions of refugees is immense. While some organizations such as the European Union provide financial assistance, Turkey bears significant costs. Domestic political debates increasingly reflect public frustration over the refugee presence, with rising xenophobia and calls for stricter immigration policies. Against this backdrop, the idea of receiving several million Uyghurs would add enormous strain to Turkey's social and economic systems. Although the Uyghur diaspora is relatively small compared to Syrian refugees, the rumor of a sudden influx of millions highlights the sensitivity of Turkey's refugee debate. The Turkish economy has faced persistent challenges in recent years. High inflation, currency depreciation, and declining purchasing power have affected daily life for citizens. Unemployment, particularly among the youth, remains a concern. The cost of hosting refugees contribute to economic debates. Public spending on housing, education, and health services for refugee populations creates competition with domestic needs. The perception that refugees drive up housing prices and take jobs intensifies social tensions. Yes, adding millions of new arrivals would be economically unsustainable, making the idea of China relocating 3 million Uyghurs to Turkey unrealistic from a financial standpoint. Turkey and China maintain a complex relationship. On the one hand, Ankara values economic cooperation with Beijing. China has become a significant trade partner and an investor in infrastructure projects, including those connected to the Belt and Road Initiative. On the other hand, cultural and political ties with the Uyghur people place Turkey in a sensitive position. Turkey attempts to balance these competing pressures. While Uyghurs see Turkey as a natural ally, Ankara must consider its strategic interests with Beijing. The result is often an ambiguous stance, publicly protecting Uyghur citizens and communities in Turkey while avoiding direct confrontation with China on human rights issues. Geopolitically, the rumor of China sending millions of Uyghurs to Turkey could be interpreted as disinformation designed to test public opinion, strain Turkish domestic politics, or distract from actual abuses occurring in Xinjiang. The story of 3 million Uyghurs being sent to Turkey reflects how easily unverified claims can spread in today's information environment. Such rumors fuel anxiety in Turkey, where the refugee issue is already highly sensitive, and distract from the documented realities of Uyghur repression in China. Disinformation of this type serves multiple purposes. It can undermine public trust in government institutions, generate hostility toward Uyghurs already in Turkey, and obscure the international community's responsibility to address human rights violations. Instead of focusing on unsubstantiated rumors, attention should remain on credible evidence of abuses and the protection of Uyghurs already displaced. The claim that China will send 3 million Uyghurs to Turkey has no credible basis. Neither Ankara nor Beijing has announced or even hinted at such an arrangement. The figure itself is implausible when considered against Turkey's current refugee burden and economic realities. What is real is the ongoing repression of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Forced labor, mass detention, and cultural erasure continue to affect millions of people. Turkey, with its existing Uyghur diaspora, plays a role in offering refuge, though its stance is constrained by economic and diplomatic considerations. However, for Turkey, the challenge will remain balancing its domestic refugee crisis with its moral and cultural obligations to a people who share deep historical and linguistic ties.